Sure. Good morning, everybody. Today we are lucky to have Erin Rice with us here from NRCS. She is the NRCS State Forester. It's going to talk about NRCS practices with a little introduction and have some conversation about how CDs and NRCS can be better working together for forestry.
Yeah, great, thank you. And you pronounced my name right, which is the hard one. So good job there. So my name is Erin Rice. As I said, I'm new to my position. I just stepped into the role of State Forester like around Labor Day, but I've been with the agency for maybe 15 years. And I started as a soil con in Ellensburg and then resource con there. I switched over to the west side about 8 years ago into this position working for the Soils and Plants Science division of NRCS. So I have this really dreamy job in which I got to be a forest ecologist, mapping the ecology of the soils of the National Park was my job. So I got paid to hike, backpack, and now I'm completely flip-flopped into this back into policy and rules and stress and wondering what I did with my life. But so Margaret asked me to cover a number of things, and part of that was to give you kind of an overview of who I am and where I'm coming from in this position. And I decided to kind of go in a different way. Rather than talking about myself, I kind of just wanted to talk about who inspires me, to give you kind of an idea of what my priorities are, what gets me excited in the morning to get to work. I'm going to have a pop quiz. I know you guys had trivia last night. I have prizes. So how this is going to work is there's going to be three questions. I'm going to start with a photo. If you can name that person, I want you to raise your hand. First person to get it correctly wins. If we don't get it by photo, I'll give you a few quotes and clues. See if you can get them. I'll talk about their science a little bit, why they inspire me. And then I'll segue completely back for some of the newbies that are in the audience of who NRCS is, what we do in the realm of forestry, how I like to think about integrating these kind of my forest superstars, as I call them, into our mission of helping the land. And then lastly, how conservation districts and NRCS can partner together. Okay, so one really nerdy thing about me is that in my free time, I look up the etymology of words. And this is one of my favorite words. And I think probably it sparked my interest because of my time working in soils. But I love the word humility because the etymology of it comes literally from humus, from earth, from soil. And what keeps coming up as I kind of research these three people that I'm going to talk about is they all talk about humility a lot in their work. And that just kind of resonates with me, that I try to approach kind of my pathway forward. Also, I always make humiliation of myself generally in the process, but just kind of coming back to that root, looking things from the ground up, getting, to the ground, lowly, humble approach to forestry. So, okay, here's your first person. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, you gotta raise your hand. Okay. So, because we were just talking about soil, you get, worms. Chances to win. Okay, so Aldo Leopold. One thing regarding humility, he says, one of the focal points of a new attitude is an intelligent humility towards man's place in nature. And kind of most famous comment is the thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. And I will just admit, I'm from Wisconsin. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for my bachelor's. And because Aldo Leopold has this Wisconsin connection with Sand County Almanac, we probably had to read that every single year of college. And I came from the city, so going into forestry was kind of this random new place for me, and thinking about conservation was not something I just really did. So the book didn't resonate with me for a really long time, and even though I read it so many times, I just kind of found it boring, to be honest. But now that I work for NRCS, I think about it all the time on how we can integrate Aldo's legacy into what we're doing, because we're given this gift in our positions to be able to be the ultimate conservationist, right? And so I'll go back and talk about him in a little bit more, but I want to get my next person. What you got?
Jerry Forrest
Jerry.
Franklin.
All right, let's see if I can get it. Oh, all right, so I tried to give you a hard one with picking an old picture of him, but he talked about humility a lot. But he said, hopefully with knowledge comes some humility, and in terms of ecological forestry, he said, most fundamentally, it has to do with humility and approaching these systems with humility. So Dr. Jerry Franklin, and I'll give you a little bit more overview, but if anyone's not familiar with Jerry Franklin, I think the Seattle Times is doing an awesome job right now trying to preserve his legacy. There's a ton of interviews and YouTube videos with him that are great and inspiring to watch. Okay, this next person's really hot right now, so I'll see. Oh,
Is this Suzanne tomorrow?
yeah, okay, so you get aliens. You're the only, I'm an alien. Okay, so Dr. Simmer. She has been said, or she said, to show humility toward and tolerance for all, we are connected in the circle of life. I really want to focus a little bit on Dr. Simmer because she's really, to me, creating this whole new world of forestry that we never knew existed. And I find it so inspiring. And just finding ways that we can integrate her work into our work that we do in conservation, I think is really important. Okay, so kind of going back to Franklin and his approach of ecological management. So Franklin's work has been about a lot with Douglas fir stance. And so he researched Douglas fir. He was integral in working with the Clinton administration when it came to spotted owl management and progressing through that controversy. He helped co-author the Natural Vegetation of Oregon and Washington. This is a really amazing Washington superstar. But through his research, he's really found that having multi-story, multi-aged, multi-structured forests are going to pay us dividends down the road. And I'm not going to say that we shouldn't be doing even age management in our work, but I do feel like when we are working with those systems, if we have that opportunity to kind of stretch that narrative or change that mindset a little bit, and bringing it back to the science, I think we can really accomplish wonderful things. So Jerry's work says, you know, even if we can extend the rotations on these even age managements, we have the ability to increase carbon storage, increase carbon sequestration, water storage. That's going to help us increase biodiversity, our resilience. And he really says that our job is to collaborate with nature. And I really like to take his approach as I'm going into the forest systems to see if we can kind of change that kind of historical narrative, especially that we have on the west side. Just one example, I was working with a landowner and they had, you know, their homogeneous stand of Douglas fir, and the landowner mentioned, you know, I'll probably log this in 10 years, and the trees are probably 8 inches, and they have that total prerogative to do that, right? I'm not going to tell them that's their objective, that they can't. But then they quoted Jerry Franklin while I was out there, and I thought, well, okay, I have this opportunity. You brought his name up. And so I just kind of put in a little thing, you know, well, Jerry, if we're talking about him, he would say, maybe you shouldn't cut right now. Maybe you're going to be better off. You're going to make more money if you consider extending it. And it was a really nice win just to kind of give that little push, a little nudge. And a couple weeks later, I heard back from the planner working with that individual, and they wrote and they said, you know, we really want Erin to know we decided we're going to extend it, we're not going to log it. And here we go. So it's like little wins that we can have. Same thing with Simmer. So her research is totally different, but it completely collaborates with what Jerry Franklin did. So if you're not familiar with Dr. Simmer, her work, to just wrap it up in a nutshell. So we've known that mycorrhizal fungi have always interacted with plant roots, but her research has shown that not only do they interact with that, but they share their resources to other trees in the forested systems. And her research has shown that trees interact not as competitors, but they're cooperating out there. And these large diameter, kind of what she considers mother trees, can be connected to hundreds of trees at one time. And those basically old growth trees can increase survivability of new trees up to 4 times out there. And so her kind of stance on it is when we do cut, we need to save these legacy trees so that the wood, the genes, and their wisdom can be passed on to the next generation. And she says that we need to be conservationists. Okay, so then tying it back to Leopold, kind of the ultimate first conservationist that I think about. And one of my favorite quotes with Leopold is, I have read many definitions of what is a conservationist and written not a few myself, but I suspect the best one is written not with a pen, but with an axe. And I think this is really where the heart of our jobs come into play, and also where we can integrate the art and science of silviculture into what we're doing out there on the landscape and with our careers. So we've all seen this, you know, Venn diagram, that we can't just have one of these bubbles. We can't just have a social, ecological, or economic bubble if we want to be sustainable. So I'm not going to say at any point that we shouldn't have logging in our systems. This is part of a huge economic driver in Washington State. It's important. This is also logging and forest history is part of Washington culture. I guess, focusing on how can we, you know, find that balance, find our landowners' objectives. And then also, you know, can we think about this and try to integrate it with that level of humility? So I'm going to segue now to kind of a broad overview of NRCS for folks that haven't worked with us, or new to us. So we are a federal agency. Our mission and motto is helping people help the land. We are a small agency under USDA. We support locally led conservation, just like the conservation districts. I'm sure you've all had to watch the videos in your ag learn of how we were set up to be married sisters together. NRCS offers voluntary programs. We always provide technical assistance that's free, just like you. And then we have very popular conservation programs with payments. We are non-regulatory, and like you, we are located in service centers across the state. So one of the most popular things that folks can utilize through our programs are forest management plans. And we can help pay and connect landowners with a technical service provider to provide and develop plans that are specific for their lands. We fund this through our input program, and it would be kind of a one-stop shop for this cost share. We also now offer pathways for these folks to have their TSPs write their implementation requirements, so that helps kind of keep a burden off the local office staff. If we have TSPs that are able to do that, we will pay for that extra bit of work. So our most popular program is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. We call it EQIP for short. And this is providing free technical assistance. And then we sign a contract that provides financial assistance with them. This is going to address specific resource concerns that we find on the landscape. And we're going to have conservation practices associated with them. It does require a forest management plan to be eligible for any of these practices. So it's a little confusing because we fund the forest management plan through EQIP. But then to actually really get in the bread and butter of EQIP, you must have that forest management plan. So I'll go over some examples of what we do with forestry. So our most common forest management practices is, number one is our forest stand improvement. And we can offer it to address thinning. We can do pre-commercial thinning, stocking changes, species selection. We can use it to address insect and disease management. But really, when you're working with this one practice, this is really where we get to be, as foresters, kind of that art of kind of creating that silviculture of the landscape. We've got a ton of flexibility on how we write these plans. Just depending on what the landowner's objective is and the skill set in the office, we can cater this to be as complicated or as easy as it needs to be. We have woody residue treatment, which is basically our way of dealing with all the slash that's typically generated from the stand improvement. We have payment rates that are based off of kind of the level of complexity of these. So for example, if someone's just doing mop and scatter, just cutting up, bucking up trees, scattering them out there, you're gonna get a lower payment versus someone who might have access and needs to a masticator or a chipper out there. Our payment rates are gonna be a lot higher to compensate that extra machinery, fuel, specialized labor. We also offer pruning. It's usually used for wildfire prevention. It's very common east of the Cascades. However, I'm really trying to push it to be more popular on the west side. I think for one, we're not, I guess maybe historically, NRCS on the west side hasn't really felt like wildfire should be as large of a priority. And I guess I disagree. I feel wildfire is part of the ecology on the west side. It's just a longer return interval, right? So we're not servicing our landowners if we're not taking that natural disturbance into our management cycle. So I'm really trying to encourage a little bit more wildfire resiliency, removing ladder fuels and means a good way for us to do that. And lastly, tree shrub planting. We can provide a lot of options with that planting. It can be very wildlife focused. It can be changing species composition. We are one of the only agencies that provides tree planting following disturbance. So that's one thing to always keep in mind, especially if you're working east of the Cascades where we have a lot of frequent fire. Please do send them to our offices. We've got private landowners that have been affected. We can get them signed up and hopefully get them assistance right away with being able to reforest. Some additional practices that are less common but available and gain speed. We offer fire and fuel breaks. This is starting to be a lot more popular east of the Cascades. We have riparian forest buffers, so if people want to increase shade or extend the extent or add more wildlife characteristics, they're riparian forest buffers. That's something we can work with. We have structures for wildlife, which could be habitat piles or snag creation. Brush management is really popular on the west side to deal with pervasive and invasive weeds like Scotch broom and blackberry. This is especially important to utilize that practice when we are reforesting so that our seedlings actually have a fighting chance out there. And lastly, agroforestry is not as popular yet, but I think that's going to be changing. And within agroforestry, we offer silvopasture, farming, windbreaks, and alum crop. So how does our funding work? We try to set our payment rates at about 70 to 90% of what the actual cost is going to be. So those payment rates, our typical landowner gets the 70%. And then anyone who qualifies as a beginner, socially disadvantaged, or veteran farmer will have that target rate of 90%. Now, like DNR, they're kind of a 50% cost share rate. Ours are tied to a unit cost. So it's either going to be by acre or by unit, and we have just a flat rate. So depending on the landowner, they could be making 100%, they could make 50%. So it's just hard to really tell based on what the labor rates that they're dealing with. But what I can say is that Washington is lumped with California and Oregon when it comes to creating one cohesive payment rate. And since we have California, our rates are pretty darn competitive. And I think in actuality, people are probably able to cost share above these 70% and 90% targets. And then we make payments after the work is completed and they meet our specifications. Okay, our second kind of most popular program is the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. And this is really intended for landowners who have established conservation history already on their grounds. And this is a contract for working lands. We are building upon existing conservation efforts that they've already done. And this program provides a lot of flexibility, and a lot of we have enhancements through this program, have logging written right into it. So they can be creating gaps for wildlife, they could be targeting selective removal of trees. There's a lot of flexibility. And this is a 5-year contract with annual payments. And they can be up to $40,000 annually. And so total contract value could be up to $200,000. However, it's paid by per acre. So a lot of our forest landowners just don't have as much acreage. So it's easy maybe for a hayland operator to have an acreage to max out in CSP. It's really hard for a forest landowner to. However, a few years ago, they created a floor for all folks going into CSP. So no contract annual payment is less than $4,000 per year. So it's a nice program to encourage landowners that want to just keep up with things. Maybe this helps cover their taxes a year or some extra labor that they're looking for. Types of enhancements that can happen here are wildlife nesting structures. This is where we offer biochar. We can have selective harvesting with this, plantings for biodiversity or plantings for wildlife. We also offer management scenarios to foster vertically maple sugar production through this. Okay, so I'm going to segue now to kind of what is the reality, what do our forest projects look like actually in Washington with NRCS? And I pulled this one for like a 15-year-old presentation, but I think it still works. What really comes to our landowner objectives, oftentimes when we walk out there, we see these scenarios and our landowners are like, oh, I love this forest because I don't see my neighbors. And because I have so much greenery, this must mean health of my forest. This is so beneficial for wildlife. I have all this peace and quiet and wildflowers. But we walk in and we're like, no, it's terrible. We have so many disease issues. There's mistletoe, spruce budworm, bark beetles. This is overstocked, a million ladder fields. There's not even any browse for elk and deer because there's no sunlight getting to the bottom. We have, noxious weeds and then just a fire waiting to happen. So one thing that we try to do is really restore structure and reduce stocking in stands that have been neglected and have been dealing with overstocking. So just really utilizing our kind of that silviculture, art and science to create mosaics on the landscape when we can. Other times just really thinning things out, bringing things up, creating more wildfire resilience. We can also manage for old growth characteristics through basically kind of that art of silviculture. If this is a priority for landowners, we can start to try to push the successional pathway of these forests through creative management. And kind of, I like the idea of bringing in Jerry and Suzanne's research and keeping these large legacy trees out there and creating kind of this more balanced mosaic on the landscape is something that we could do if our landowners are interested. Basically kind of thinning to reduce wildfire risk, this example, it's hard to see through the slide, but that has had wildfire through it. Really stayed low to the ground. We have low mortality, pretty good success through that program. Again, our practices can use heavy equipment, not just with an axe or a chainsaw that we're out there. We can cover the rates for this heavy equipment. And if our landowners have means to be able to work with masticators, fellow ranchers, by all means, let's work harder or work smarter, not harder, right? Should there be pathways to harvest? I think there should be. And I want to encourage a little bit more creativity and flexibility for our landowners to be able to do this. This is an easy thing to justify east of the Cascades, and this is where we're dipping our toes into being able to work with this. For me, my priority is that I would rather be able to watch logs go to a mill than logs go up in smoke. And for a lot of the reality, especially east of the Cascades, people aren't making money. If anything, we try to break even. So I really want to provide more flexibility. This is going to be kind of a system change for NRCS, but something we're trying to be very careful with and starting to reintroduce, especially east of the Cascades. Prescribed fire. This is another new avenue that NRCS is dipping our toes in very slowly and very carefully. The one new thing that we can provide landowners are burn plans, prescribed burn plans. So they can now sign up for cost share reimbursement to work with a TSP. However, we do not have a TSP enrolled yet. So it's kind of, you know, do we put the horse before the cart? But we had to start somewhere. So now we're really trying to solicit interest for TSBs to get certified through DNR's burn plan, so that folks can sign up for it. Down the road, maybe Washington NRCS will provide cost share for prescribed burning. We're one of the only states that doesn't. I think it's going to be a long road, honestly, but these burn plans are a great way for us to get started. It's giving our landowners information, and they can choose to move forward if they choose to. But it's an exciting new avenue that we're pursuing and looking at. Okay, so just a few pathways with conservation partnerships and where we're at. And I wanted to address kind of right away, I've heard from folks as I've been in this position and going to a number of events that their relationships with their NRCS office is not going great. And I am very thankful for folks who have reached out and have let me know this. And it's really important to me to try to repair these connections, to bring that, you know, sister agency back together. You know, being sisters means we're family. Sometimes we don't, we don't always love who we're stuck with, or we don't always see the same way, but we are family and we're after the same objective. So in situations where I do know that we've got some, kind of just, we could be better, I'll say. I'm trying to reach out to those district conservationists, be able to step in, because we can't have a forester in every office. That's just not a reality where our agency can be right now, but we can pull people in. It's going to take longer, but it doesn't mean we can't do that. I'm also excited that finally, as an agency, for the first time I've ever worked with us, that they're looking at putting in area foresters. And we just advertised for an area forester in each area. Sadly, we only ended up with one, and I don't even know if that's official yet, but we at least have one. And as far as I know, they're going to refly those positions. I really hope. Lately, I think part of the problem with getting interest in them is that it's been open to federal employees only, and I really hope they can commit to everyone, because I think we could get, not that I want to steal anybody in this room, but we, if anybody's interested, we have really good talent here, and for the DNR, you know, there's a lot of other folks that we could tap into, if we can allow to hire that way, but that's outside of my job. Duties, and no one asks me for my opinion, so. But, my hope is there. Also, what I can say is that now we at least have one area forester. And we know that there are some places that they can start to target and provide some extra assistance. So I really hope within the next year, we can really turn things around where we've got those kind of broken links. When it comes to sharing, I know a number of folks are signed up with some trainings that I'm putting on this summer. We are always able to help support each other, share information, and conservation districts are always invited. Usually when we're having trainings, especially with forestry, please just if you're not finding out about things, just ask your local office. We've had like Joe Hill for the last training they put on. He just kind of heard about it and he came, and that's great. You're welcome to join us when we can do this. When it comes to collaborating, I'd love to be able to collaborate on projects. Maybe, you know, especially when it comes to DNR, they have that 8-inch diameter limit. We don't necessarily have that with NRCS. So let's see how we can work together, and especially if we're dealing with big landowners, who can take the easy stuff, who can take the more complicated stuff, what needs to happen now, what can happen later, because the NRCS is, you know, notoriously slow to get things off the ground. So, you know, maybe we're that next step, that second entry to a property. Through our CPP, obviously, we have a lot of opportunities to collaborate. And then with support, just really remembering that we are here with the same exact goal. So how can we help each other? We have the same objective. Let's work together to make this a more fruitful future for all of us. So with that, I just hope that we can take all this forward and kind of go back to that whole idea of humility. And I really hope that through my position, I kind of want to approach my forest systems with fresh eyes every time I'm out there, and an opportunity to learn. I'm just one person. I don't know this whole state, and there's a ton I can learn from all of you each time I go out. So with that, I can take some questions and comments if there are. Yeah.
You sort of touched on this, but so we have access to DNR's cost share programs, and now we have access to your cost share program. Do you have an idea, has there been conversation between your agencies about when we should go to each of you? Like when is best to come to DNR first, or when is best to just go straight to NRCS, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say if you have the opportunity, I'll go to the landowner at the same time. Or collaborate with public meetings. It was really nice. Skagit did, and I got the flu, so I didn't get to go, but they did a really great collaboration with Whatcom Island, Skagit, and Snohomish counties. Had everybody come to the same room, had all the agency support there. And everybody was able to kind of describe, what are my roles? What do I do best? And I think that really helped the landowner be able to navigate. And then in the second session, it was just a walk up, talk to your forester from each agency, figure out who you want to talk to after you get that information. I thought that was a really successful way of approaching it, because it is complicated. And I do know also, like NRCS, yes, we're federal, so you're gonna sign your names more times than you did when you bought your home. But once it's done, it's done, right? You get in with FSA, it can take 10 minutes, that's it. Just get in there and you're always set. So I would just really encourage, when I worked in Kittitas County, Suzanne Wade was my conservation district forester back then, if anybody still remembers her, she's been retired, but you know, we would just go together often if we could make it happen, and sell both things and include the DNR. So That's my answer. Just try and talk and integrate everybody.
Yeah, can you talk more about, kind of your larger diameter projects and like your potential pathways for second entries? I wasn't really aware that you all thinking of that, so yeah, I'd love to hear more about how you've been able to make that work and whether we can do that on the side.
Yeah. So it's really easy to justify a lot of it with uneven age management. What I want to be careful when it comes to even age is that we can't be supplementing just that cut, plant, rinse, repeat cycle that we have. But when it comes to uneven age management, easy to do. So NRCS, so the way I've understood it, I guess, well, oh yeah, here's your stuff. DNR has a programmatic agreement when it comes to bypassing SEPA that they have to stay under that 8-inch diameter. Does that sound right? The origin of that? Okay, that's how I believe. NRCS does not have that rule. There's nothing that says we can't take down big wood. So I like to kind of use us as an example too, that if you have big wood that needs to come out, because a lot of times it does. We've got disease, insect, bark beetle, lots of problems. Makes good reason, right, to remove that one. Let us do that, because we can do that through our programs. We do have to be careful. If there's any sort of log removal, we then have to integrate forest practice rules within it. But that's something we're trying to train our foresters on and give them more experience with working with forest practices, who to contact, and when to know when we have to kind of guide our landowner, make sure that they're following their rules and regulations. Because we're non-regulatory, it's still, it's within all of our guidance and specifications, like you must follow all the rules. We're not gonna worry about it too much, but we want to make sure that our landowners are protected if they go there. But yeah, absolutely. Depending on what the management prescription is, it doesn't just need to be small.
Is that done to the NRCS?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which practices?
So forest and improvement, it's just, when it comes to writing what our IR implementation requirements, just needs to be described in here, what you're targeting, why. Yeah, I think this is a different way of thinking on the west side, because a lot of it is, a lot of plantations, we work on a lot of plantations, and we're just doing that pre-commercial planning. But there's a lot more flexibility than what we can do. Anything else? Yeah.
Cities currently trying to work on a sliding scale to increase map for historically underserved in our offshore program. Could you talk a little bit more about that process and how you
Yeah, so anyone who's considered a beginner farmer, which is 10 years or less. So it's kind of confusing with our forest landowners. So if they've owned their property 10 years or less, if they've, shown no tax history or income from forest commodities, they can often, fall into that beginner. So then we also have socially disadvantaged. So anyone who's actually probably anybody have tell me below the poverty line or at or below the poverty line qualifies for 90%. Any non-white participants that we're working with, and veterans also qualify. But one thing I made the mistake of, I was working with a Korean veteran for a really long time. They're not eligible. It's really for new veterans. Fabulous. Clear to go. Yeah.
You might not know this, but what, what next for
Well, when you sign up for our farm service agency to enroll, you kind of have to do that one-stop shop, that registration with them before working with NRCS. In there, you're going to fill out an adjusted gross income form. And so there you're going to basically have to put down your social security number and what your adjusted gross income is on average for the last 3 years. So it would be based on that. But, yeah, others are basically sort of self-certifying. Based on getting rid of. Yeah,
That definition. For implementation. Does a landowner go out and contact contractors themselves and get few bids, something like that? How does that work?
okay, we don't, I don't wanna say we don't care, but we don't, no. We're not gonna check, the deal that the landowner makes with however the work is being done is their own deal. We just say, for this acre, I'm gonna pay you $1,500 to thin these trees to my specifications. So, and then at the end, we're gonna pay that $1,500. So the landowner is good to shop around, the landowner can do it themselves too. And that money is in their pocket, as long as they do it, they meet the goal of what we identified and we created together. The payment doesn't matter. I think the DNR does require like a match, we do not. It's just, we'll reimburse you this amount for this project, this job.
So reimbursement, you also do direct sign the payment or anything like that.
We can, yeah. So, it's a little bit, I don't want to say it's a little bit more complicated, but it's just a little bit more complicated on our end to set it up. Sometimes it might take a little longer, but that's possible. And especially when it comes to our forest management plans, we do that a lot. We just make the payment to the technical service provider directly. Then looks good. I will also say, because we are talking about money, it is good to know that all this is taxable income. So when things, this does become a burden, potentially, we do encourage folks to make sure that they understand how that's gonna work at the tax year, with our funding and plan accordingly, or, a lot of it you can write off, but I'm not a tax expert. So. Anyone else? Yeah.
I guess in the meantime, while you're trying to hire area foresters, is there specific TSP trainings or something that we as conservationists professionals that don't necessarily have a forester on staff, like myself, on wildfire specific doing home assessments, shipping, that kind of thing? Is there something that I could train up on to be able to provide some of those gaps in services while the NRCS hires area foresters?
Yeah, so we do have trainings that are advertised with the conservation district, so that's an avenue. I would say, and a lot of folks, I meant to mention and acknowledge this too, are coming to us saying, how I want to work on my job approval authority with NRCS so that I can write IRs, and that is something that you can totally do. So if that's something you want to work on, you need the kind of, then we just unveiled in the process, but you'll want to work with whoever your district conservationist is in your area. They have to sign off on kind of moving that forward, but you only have to show kind of one example for us to review before getting that job approval now. So that's a great way. If you want to reach out, we can always set you up with kind of your best local expert or to kind of help guide you through that process. I mean, we also send our folks to a lot of external trainings too. So anything dealing with entomology, forest pathology, at least providing if you don't know where to go, who to talk to get into those, then we can always facilitate that. That answer, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Two things, so on that, I would also say it might be worth seeing what local conservation district your nearest CD forester is, and if they really be happy to like go out and do some, having that along the site, this is stuff on the board, do stuff like that. If that's something that we can have to do, I guess, a little further. Okay, that's great, thank you. But also with the job approval, could you explain how explicitly that makes things easier on the NRCS side of things, obtaining that? For us to help you guys, how it helps you guys.
Yeah, it's huge. I will say, maybe you may find this, depending on the office you're with. Maybe not everybody wants to get rid of that sense of control. So you may have offices that are like, help me, yes, write my IRs, which you might be in, right? We might have other offices that have a forester in there that's like, hey, I got this. We don't need that service. And it's really up to the DC of that office to kind of decide how they want to have that coverage. But it's huge, especially where we have offices where we don't have foresters. We have a conservation district partner who's willing to do that. I can't tell you how appreciative I am of the folks who have offered to help us. It's huge. And I know it's a huge workload that you're just volunteering to do, and that's amazing. And I feel a little guilty taking those services because I don't know what we're giving back necessarily. But yeah, I would say if your office has a need, they don't have that specialization there, please, if you have the time and the background to help, it's always appreciated. Especially where we have a backlog and not someone there who can do it. So I really appreciate the folks that have it. Okay, anything? Well, thank you.